Welcome to Fairytale Fritz. Please make sure you listen to this recording in a location where you can safely fall asleep. If you enjoy fairy tales and bedtime stories, please hit the subscribe button in the bottom right corner and you will receive updates and more tales. Today's story is Grimm's fairy tale number 26, Little Red Cap, or Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there lived a very sweet little girl. Whoever laid eyes upon her couldn't help but love her, but it was her grandmother who could never give the child enough. One day she made her a present, a hooded cloak made of red velvet, and since it was so becoming and the girl always wanted to wear it, people only called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood, take this piece of cake and bottle of wine and bring them to your grandmother. She's sick and weak and this will strengthen her. Be nice and good and greet her from me. Go directly there and don't stray from the path, otherwise you'll fall and break the glass and your grandmother will get nothing." Little Red Riding Hood promised to obey her mother. Well, the grandmother lived out in the forest, half an hour from the village, and as soon as Little Red Riding Hood entered the forest, she encountered the wolf. However, Little Red Riding Hood didn't know what a wicked sort of an animal he was and was not afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," he said. "Thank you kindly, Wolf." "Where are you going so early, Little Red Riding Hood?" "To grandmother's." "What are you carrying under your apron?" "Cake and wine. My grandmother's sick and weak, and yesterday we baked this cake so it will help her get well." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "About a quarter of an hour from here in the forest. Her house is under the 3 big oak trees. You can tell it by the hazel bushes." The wolf thought to himself, "What a juicy morsel she'll be for me. Now, how am I going to catch her?" Then he said, "Listen, Little Red Riding Hood, haven't you seen the beautiful flowers growing in the forest? Why don't you look around? I believe you haven't even noticed how lovely the birds are singing. You march along as if you were going straight to school in the village, and yet it's so delightful out here in the woods." Little Red Riding Hood looked around and saw that the sun had broken through the trees and that the woods were full of beautiful flowers. So she thought to herself, "If I bring grandmother a bunch of flowers, she'd certainly like that. It's still early and I'll arrive on time." So she went into the woods to look for flowers. And each time she plucked one, she thought she saw another even prettier flower and ran for it, going deeper and deeper into the forest. But the wolf went straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who's there?" "Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some cake and wine. Open up." "Just lift the latch," the grandmother called. "I'm too weak and can't get up." The wolf lifted the latch and the door sprang open. Then he went straight to the grandmother's bed and gobbled her up. Next he took her clothes, put them on along with her nightcap, lay down in her bed and drew the curtains. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood had been running around and looking for flowers, and only when she had as many as she could carry did she continue on the way to her grandmother. She was puzzled when she found the door open, and as she entered the room, it seemed so strange inside that she thought, "Oh my God, how frightened I feel today, and usually I like to be at grandmother's." Then she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay the grandmother with her cap pulled down over her face, giving her a strange appearance. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with." "Oh, grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with." "Oh, grandmother, what big hands you have." "The better to grab you with." "Oh, grandmother, what a terribly big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with." No sooner did the wolf say that than he jumped out of bed and gobbled up poor little Red Riding Hood. After the wolf had the fat chunks in his body, he lay down in bed again, fell asleep, and began to snore very loudly. A huntsman happened to be passing by the house and thought to himself, "The way the old woman's snoring, you'd better see if something's wrong." He went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw the wolf lying in it. He had been searching for this wolf a long time and thought that the beast had certainly eaten the grandmother. "Perhaps she can still be saved," he said to himself. "I won't shoot." So he took some scissors and cut open the wolf's belly. After he made a couple of cuts, he saw the little red hood shining forth, and after he made a few cuts more, the girl jumped out and exclaimed, "Oh, how frightened I was! It was so dark inside the wolf's tummy." Soon after, the grandmother emerged. Little Red Riding Hood quickly fetched some large heavy stones, and they filled the wolf's tummy with them. When he awoke and tried to run away, the stones were so heavy that he fell down at once and died. All three were delighted. The huntsman skinned the fur from the wolf, the grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine that Little Red Riding Hood had brought, and Little Red Riding Hood thought to herself, "Never again will you stray from the path by yourself and go into the forest when your mother has forbidden it." It's also been told that Little Red Riding Hood returned to her grandmother one day to bring some baked goods. Another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her to leave the path, but this time Little Red Riding Hood was on her guard. She continued straight and told her grandmother that she had seen the wolf, that he had wished her a good day, but that he had such a mean look in his eyes that he would have eaten me if we hadn't been on the open road. "Come," said the grandmother, "we'll lock the door so he can't get in." Soon after, the wolf knocked and cried out, "Open, grandmother. It's Little Red Riding Hood, and I've brought you some baked goods." But they kept quiet and didn't open the door. So the wicked wolf circled the house several times and finally jumped on top of the roof. He wanted to wait till evening when Little Red Riding Hood would go home. He intended to sneak after her and have her in the darkness. But the grandmother realized what he had in mind. In front of the house was a big stone trough, and she said to the child, "Fetch the bucket, Little Red Riding Hood. I cooked sausages yesterday. Get the water they were boiled in and pour them into the trough." Little Red Riding Hood kept carrying the water until she had filled the big trough. Then the smell of sausages reached the nose of the wolf. He sniffed and looked down. Finally, he stretched his neck so far that he could no longer keep his balance on the roof. He began to slip from the roof and fell right into the big trough and drowned. Then Little Red Riding Hood went happily and safely to her home. The end.